I chose to interview Catherine Previte to discover the rich history behind the woman who I've known my whole life. Someone whose Italian family traveled to Boston in search of wealth and opportunity. Someone who lived during the Depression, fell in love with the man of her dreams, and raised 4 daughters. I chose to tell the story of my grandmother. Hi, I'm Julie York. Welcome to Untold Stories Coming to New England. With me today is my grandmother, Catherine Previte. Thank you for being here.
No, you're welcome. I was born in a small town called Wakefield in Massachusetts in 1923.
Now, your maiden name, Carboni, is of Italian descent.
Yes, it is.
Now, how was it that your family came to live in New England?
My dad had an uncle and an aunt who lived in Wakefield, and they sent over to Italy, and he came across when he was about 15 years old with 2 of his friends, and they came. My grandmother on my mother's side and grandfather, they lived in Boston. My grandfather had eloped with my grandmother. Her parents did not approve of my grandfather, so he just ran off with my grandmother, and they came to the United States.
After moving to the United States, it was my grandmother's grandfather and her father's uncle who set her parents up. Her father was invited for a Sunday dinner, and when her mother answered the door, it was love at first sight, and they were soon married a few months later.
My earliest childhood memory is not a very pleasant one. Maybe you have heard, quite a few years ago, there was what was known as the Beacon and Oil explosion in Everett, Mass. I, at that time, was about 4 years old, and I can remember my mother coming into my aunt's house where she was babysitting me, and she had a black hat with a yellow rose on it, and she was very agitated, and she took the hat and she tore the yellow rose off because she was going to the wake, and she did not want any color. She was all dressed in black, and there was that yellow rose on the hat. I can remember that so distinctly. I used to like to go ice skating and did a lot of walking in the summertime, visiting a cousin who lived in a city close to Revere Beach. And I remember that time was during the Depression, and there wasn't that much money, and we would walk 5 miles to get to the beach. And you'd be in the salt water, and you'd come home with the dried salt on your skin. To this day, unless I can take a shower immediately after going into salt water, I'm not a lover of the beach.
I'll never forget the story of how my grandparents met, and it's a story that I love to hear over and over again, one that I know will always bring a smile to my grandmother's face.
It was a typical Saturday, and Saturday in an Italian household, you got up in the morning, and remember my dad had died when I was 18, so now I'm 21, 22. Saturday morning I had got up and did the housework that I was supposed to do. Around noontime I ran up the hill, and there was a man who had horses, and I went horseback riding for a half hour. Came back home, and now I'm getting ready to take my shower because I'm going to catch the 5 o'clock train into Boston to go dancing with the girls who worked in the same office that I did in Boston. And there was a knock at the door, and one of my neighbors came over. I said, "Hi, how are you?" "Fine." He said, "Well, you know," he says, "I'm coming over today to propose." I said, "What?" He says, "Propose." He says, "You know," he said, "your father would have wanted me to marry you." No, no way would my father have wanted me to marry him. So now I'm looking at the watch, and I'm thinking, I have to take a shower. I have to catch the 5 o'clock train into Boston. Finally, I said to him, "Why don't you go out and talk to my mother? She's out in the backyard. You can go out and talk with her." So anyway, he went out, spoke to her. I quickly took the shower, and I ran out of the house, caught the 5:28 train into Boston, met my friends, and we used to go dancing at a place that was called Raymore Playmore. One side was slow dancing, and on the other hall was more of a fast dance and jitterbugging and that sort of thing. Anyway, I was in the dance hall and we're with a group of friends. And one of the girls said to me, look at all the sailors over there. And she says, oh, I like that sailor over there. I said, well, I'll tell you how you get them to ask you to dance. And I said, you just catch his eye. I said, then you turn away as though you're not interested. So I did that. I said, now I'll show you what I mean. I looked over. So then the sailor came up and asked me to dance. And it wasn't the sailor I was looking at. It was another one. And it was my husband. And the first thing he said to me was, I can pick out my Italians a mile away. And that upset me. I said, now who do you think you are? Now he pulls out his ID card to show me that he was of Italian descent. So all right, then I danced with him. That was okay, I danced with him. Then the next thing he said to me was, do you know how to cook? And I said, no, what do you think can openers are for? So anyway, God, then I really walked into this one. He said, you know what the trouble with the girls in Boston now? And I said, what? He said, they won't go out with a person unless they have a lot of money. I said, well, you just have asked the wrong girl. So he says to me, all right, then will you go out with me? So I said, all right. So anyway, I was to meet him on the following, I don't know whether it was a Tuesday or Wednesday, because this was a Saturday. And I was working at the Park Square building doing secretarial work. And I said to the girls, I'm not going. And one girl said, well, you have to. He's a defender of our country. I said, well, all right. I said, if he's not there by exactly 6 o'clock, I'm leaving because I can catch a 6:20 train home. And at 6 o'clock on the dot, in walks John. And that was the beginning of the end. John was an extremely friendly person, very caring, loved his family, both his brothers and sisters, immediate family, his grandchildren, his son-in-laws. Just had a very, very caring way. And what did I admire most about him? His honesty. Very honest. He wouldn't even park 1 inch out of a parking space if it said no parking and say you had extended a bit. Oh no, that was against the law. Not John.
My grandmother had 4 daughters, all relatively close in age. Elena, born in 1949, Marianne in 1954, Kathy in 1958, and Jean in 59.
Each one was a challenge. And now I realize it wasn't because of their personalities. It always happened as they got older. And now they were maturing, and I wanted them to see things from my point of view. And they were young adults, and they had their own point of view. So each one in their own way was a challenge.
What is one thing you want people to remember about you?
That I try to be helpful whenever I can, in any way that I possibly can. And I do care. I care about the country, I care about my family, I care about my friends, and that I always try to look on the bright side.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you here. I'm Julie York, here on Untold Stories Coming to New England.
Oh, thank you, sweetie.
Thank you.